Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. We are going to have what I consider a very necessary conversation. Sometimes when we are doing things, and the word for the year was collaboration, we have to figure out, how do we build a culture of collaboration? I truly believe, and we've said it a million times, that it takes teamwork to make a dream work. But how do we get all of the functioning people on the team, get them off the bench, get them in the game, and allow them to put something of themselves into the whole process? So we're going to have a great conversation concerning building a culture of collaboration. But before we do that, let's give a shout out to my main man in the studio with me, John, being the place to be. John, what's good? Hello. John, what's going on with you? Seems like it's been forever since we've had a conversation. You doing good?
I've been busy.
You've been busy. What are you busy with, John, these days?
Juggling news and producing several shows, and the hockey season's going on, so staying busy with fun stuff.
Those of you who are listening to this program, you should give mad kudos to John B. John is doing a wonderful job. But if you knew how he's running in here like with, a hamster on a wheel, just kind of going crazy,
he's hustling,
making a million things happen. But you are hearing my voice and my co-host voice in just a short second, because of the great work that John is doing. John, I certainly thank you. I know that it is not Employee Appreciation Day, and you're not my employee, but I want to say thank you for all that you do.
You make it easy.
Do I really make it easy?
You do.
Okay. See, people think I'm a prima donna, but I'm really not.
on that note, you weren't a prima donna.
I knew it was coming. I was going to say, on that note, we're bringing in Mark Bassett, my co-host. And Mark, of course, comes in with his review of me. He didn't say I wasn't a prima donna. Yeah. Certainly he did. He said I make it easy.
Those aren't necessarily the same thing. You can be a prima donna and make it easy.
No comment.
You're good at your job. So.
Oh, he's that good, huh? Okay. Yeah. All right. So no, we're here today, and I'm glad if you're looking in the social media stream, and you realize that it is now December, if you've listened to the show before, what that means for Mr. Christmas Aglow International himself, Mark Bassett.
Hey.
And as I look at his background, Mark, Christmas is in full swing.
It is. Well, I came back in mid-November. I spent 2 weeks getting ready. This past weekend, we were on the Zonta Walk in Midland. We had about, 630, 640 people come through the house.
Wow.
We have a party tonight. My wife is part of a women's group, the Zoe Club in Midland. They're having,
and just like that, we lose them when it comes to entertainment. I think he's going to be coming in just shortly. But 640 people. 40 people on a Zonta walk. Doesn't Zonta sound like something you should do in a dance and be going, hey, Zonta, and throw plates against the wall?
I honestly was looking this up to see, like, in our area what it was, and I thought it had to do with Santa. Like, I thought it was some pronunciation of that, but it's not. It's unrelated. So
when I hear Zonta, it makes me think that we should be, the dance where they get down, they bend, and they kick their knees out, their arms crossed, and they should say Zonta, and throw plates against the wall. But we certainly thank Mark. He's back in the studio. Mark, you're 640 people with your Zonta walk. Yeah. And tonight is the big Christmas party going
tonight,
down.
And then, as you know, tomorrow night I have my annual open house, so there'll probably be another 100 people. There'll be about 40 people tonight in the house, and then 100 people tomorrow night, and then actually 6 a.m. Sunday morning I'm on a plane to California. So,
Mark, how do you deal with having so many people in? I would be crazy.
I've entertained big groups for 25, 30 years. So I'm used to it. I kind of have it down. I like people in the house. So
was it you were there last year, Jonathan, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So last year we come in. I just got to let y'all know this. Last year we come in and Mark is the hostess with the mostest. And he greets everybody. And I think he had on like blue suede shoes. I promise you. Was it blue suede shoes?
They
or
were
was
red in honor of Christmas. Red
suede shoes. Okay. Yeah. Red suede shoes. and he had his what I would consider a smoking jacket on, and he's introducing and welcoming people as they come in. I said, Mark is the host Mark.
Well,
Honestly,
we had a coat check team, if you remember.
a code check team, a mobile bar team that was there. It was quite the spectacle. I was like, Mark enjoys doing this.
I do. I love it. I love opening
and
our house, and it's a little bit like the topic today. That's how you build relationships. You get to know people, and that's how you end up collaborating as you build personal relationships. Yes,
Mark.
Mother Walker. I have my your. I have to be a little careful with the Zonta walk. I don't. But yes,
Zonta walk. You couldn't put her out for the Zonta walk. You couldn't put Black Santa out for the Zonta walk, Mark. Come on now. They would have appreciated it.
They probably would. It will be out though tonight and tomorrow night for sure. Yeah.
So Mark, I'm so glad. I mean, this is your season. He's a self-proclaimed Christmas guy. And so I enjoy that you are happy. I remember we were talking probably about a month ago, and you were saying you were getting ready to start decorating, the joy that filled your soul. And I think you had everyone beaming because you were like a quote unquote a little child at Christmas.
Yep.
With the big smile. So congratulations. This is your season. We certainly celebrate that, and I'm excited to see what's ahead of you for this next couple of days. I'm sure you're going to be in your element.
Yeah.
But I want to get going. I want us to jump right into the conversation we're having today, and I think that this is really good because Mark and I, even the way that we met initially, Mark, a lot of the elements that we're going to talk about today are things that we took into consideration in our working together and the things that were happening. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about building a culture of collaboration. And I want us to talk about this. We're going to talk about this from both a community perspective, or if you're just, even if you have a church and you're trying to make something happen, and definitely if you're looking in the workspace. Now, okay, so this conversation is a very real conversation. I've been in some conversations recently in the area, and we want to give a shout out to those folks down in Chicago. I'm sure y'all understand the same thing that we're going through here in Joliet, Illinois, as it's happening in Saginaw, Michigan, on how to bring people together and how to do so in a fashion that celebrates everyone that's a part of what's happening. Now, I want to ask a question, Mark, before we even get started with the meat of this. Is it even possible to create collaboration if there is a very lopsided if we're starting from a very lopsided place to begin with? If all the chips are in one person's hand and they're trying to, hey, we're gonna bring Kareem and John in, and we're gonna be collaborative. Is it possible to collaborate in that capacity?
I think it is, but it depends on the person with all the power. They have to come from a spirit of I'm willing to and wanting to collaborate even if I don't need to, kind of for the better term of for the good of the longer term.
Okay.
And sometimes you'll see that like in the business world when you're in a supplier customer position, sometimes one has all the power over the other, and you might any kind of one-sided relationship isn't going to last. And so for the good of if you want a real partnership, it can never be one-sided. So even if you have all the power, you may be willing to give some away for the benefit of the long term.
Okay. And in your thoughts, Jonathan, I think in your thoughts, in your young, tender mind thoughts, when you think about it, that sounded weird.
It did.
In your mind, when you think about collaboration, how would you define what collaboration means? Like, really, what is the essence of collaboration?
I think that the saying more than the sum of its parts kind of defines collaboration pretty well, in that being able to put together the resources of two people, two organizations, two businesses, whatever, or more than that, is able to really produce something that is way more than if all of these different pieces were working individually. There's been a lot of examples of that I can think of.
Like what?
The Memorial Cup coming to Saginaw.
Oh, you said it, not me. Okay,
I know, well,
go ahead.
I'm a hockey guy. No, it's something that there's so many moving parts too, and there's so many organizations and so many people involved that are pushing it forward, that it's going to be more than if any of these organizations tried to do their own thing to make it special.
Okay, I'm glad you said that. So how would you define what you think, both of you, Mark, and you're familiar with what's happening here?
Yeah.
How would you guys define what would be the greatest challenges towards bringing bring collaboration into this process? One, I think the mammoth size of what's taking place.
Yeah, the more entities involved, the tougher and tougher it gets, because I think that's the biggest issue. Is just the more different entities you have, the harder and harder it gets. And I think the broader you make the scope, the more impossible it gets. So the bigger it gets, it needs to be really specific.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, go ahead.
Ego is one of the biggest hindrances to collaboration. Being able to say,
I would agree,
you can do this better than I can, so you're going to handle this part, and I'm going to stick to supporting you, or I'm going to handle this other part that I do better. And you being able to say, yep, you can do that better, so you should do that.
Yeah. I think I think you hit the nail on the head, Jonathan, with that. And it's interesting because I've been involved this year. When I say collaboration is the name of the game, I have been involved with so many efforts, with so many different groups. I'm doing something tomorrow with the YMCA and another organization. And it's interesting how many times those ships almost sank because of ego and people not recognizing and realizing what their strong points are, that they bring, and operating in those areas where they are most efficient. Now, Mark, as an employer, as a former CEO of a corporation, and working with other corporations to kind of get them aligned and to make them better position them, how do you deal with egos in a room when trying to build something great?
Well, again, I think ultimately you have to build a relationship, and you have to build a personal trust. I mean, everyone's got an ego. Even people that work together on teams have egos. Great sports teams, all these athletes have egos, but they come
Jonathan has
together.
an ego.
They come together for a common goal, and they may not love each other, but they certainly build a trust with each other, and they have relationships and trust. I think ultimately that's really, really important. There has to be a common goal. There has to be a common trust and respect. And, then you get into like, everybody's got to know their role, kind of what you guys were talking about earlier. Everyone wants to be the star quarterback. Well, you're not necessarily a star quarterback. You're something else. But that's really important too, because without a good offensive line, the star quarterback is
trash. Yeah. He gets murdered, right?
Look at University of Colorado. One of the best quarterbacks in the country, stacked 60 times. They're 3, 4, and 8, or whatever they are. So
is that Neon Dion?
Neon's son, Shador.
Yeah. I mean, but he's having trouble because he's trying to keep his woman. He and Tracy Edmonds, they separated. I'm like, dude, if you don't want Tracy, and this is completely off. We talk about collaborative. Someone should have collaborated with him to keep that woman. Tracy Edmonds has to be one of the most beautiful people inside and out on the planet. I don't know what you want after that. But anyways, we're moving forward. I did a little bit of research. This required me to do some research because I thought that this was so very important. And it says many managers assume that the key to leading high-performing teams is to hire talented individuals and then do whatever you can to keep them happy. Mark, I'm sure you're aware of that. A Gallup poll made this statement concerning the American workplace. Happiness is a great starting point, but just measuring worker satisfaction of happiness levels and catering to their wants often fails to achieve the underlying goal of employee engagement, improved business outcomes. So, Mark, when we talk, we spent a lot of time, especially during and in that that mid-COVID season, catering to employees. Like we want to make sure that you're safe. We want to make sure that you're okay. We want to make sure that that there's nothing here that is hurting you. And then we had this social outcry so that we didn't want people to be hurt. We wanted everyone's feelings to be heard. We wanted everyone, touchy feely. How do you deal with all of these issues, and how do you begin to deal with an employee's, if from an employee's to, how do you deal with an employee's happiness, but also understanding that the bottom line is productivity?
Yeah. Well, it's a delicate balance. I think it starts for me again. This is just me, and I ran, businesses for 15, 20 years, and it starts with kind of a very explicit culture. Ultimately, I think people are in a lot of ways pretty simple. They want to be a part of something, so they want to be a part of something bigger. They want to understand what they're supposed to do and why it's important. They want to feel like they're rewarded and recognized for a good job. They want to feel like they have a chance to grow and develop, and that you're proactively involved in their growth and development, both professionally and personally. And then I always said that, we should try to have fun too, because work is a whole lot better when it's fun than when it's not fun. But there is, on the other that's not a counterbalance, but there's also, you have to be very clear what the expectations are. So here is your job. Here is the metrics for this year. You're going to be held accountable for these 3 or 4 key metrics. We're going to talk about them once a month, once a quarter. How are we doing against those key metrics? If you're diverging in a negative way, you need to come in with like why and what's your plan, and can you get back on course? And so it's a lot about, I think, active discussion, real life discussion, but engaging the employees both from you're part of something and we're going to help you grow and develop, and here's what your job is and why it's important, but also a culture of accountability, because ultimately none of us is going to be there tomorrow if we're not delivering.
Mark, you're going to have Jonathan overthrowing the studio in a second. But go ahead, John.
No, I think this translates pretty well when we're talking about community groups and organizations working with one another. If you're just catering to each other and making each other feel good, that's often not going to actually accomplish anything. I think it's important, that word accountability that you put in there. When you're working with a group of peers, not necessarily in an employer-employee relationship, being able to trust each other enough to hold each other accountable and say, hey, we need this, and push whatever the goal is forward.
But you said something that was so important. You restated something that Mark said that was so important. Working with peers. I think when we look at things collaboratively, and we look at building a team, we have to, first of all, we have to be able to see everybody in that space as a peer, someone who is our equal, regardless of what role they play. When it comes to us working collaboratively, everyone has to be seen as an equal peer. And I think that we sometimes lose that. And Mark, you addressed something that I think is so important. And I don't think you realize how important it was, because I'll promise you, 2 years ago, if you would have put it in a bottle and put it on the shelf, you'd probably be the richest man in America, because you began to address issues that many people had surrounding how do we deal with these millennials. If you remember, and you were leading, you were at the helm during that time.
Yep.
How do we deal with these millennials? Oh my gosh, they're so finicky. Oh my gosh, they don't want to do this. But really, you outlined a couple of things. First of all, they want a role that's meaningful, which I think most people want. But they also did not grow up in our mom and pops, the old school way of thinking that you don't have a voice. They were raised by folks who told them, ex-Jenners and baby boomers, who told them that you are important and what you say have value. Remember, we were teaching all of these important tools and techniques. And so they go into a workplace thinking, hey, well, I'm here in school. They're telling professors, standing up to professors, I don't agree with what you're saying. And people are thinking like, oh my gosh, they're crazy. But this is a generation that we created, that to think that that they have value, that they're important, which is important, and it's true. But they now want to be a part of the table conversation, what's happening and how are we going to move there. They want to make sure that what they're doing is meaningful, that it has impact, that it has value, and they want to do it in their own way, on their own terms.
Can I say something?
I was going to ask you to say something. Go ahead.
I don't actually think that's different than any generation.
That's what I'm saying.
Because when I started out in my career, I wanted to feel like I was a part of something, and that was a long, long time ago. And, my best bosses let me ask them really tough questions. Why are we doing this? I don't agree with this. And we would have a debate. And, just because I want something different doesn't mean I'm going to get it or that I'm right. And that's, my personal leadership style is in it. There's no one right style, but mine was to be very visible. I walked around a lot, and any question was a fair question. Now, I may, if you challenge me and disagree with me, that's cool. But I'm not just going to go, you know what, you're right. You may be right. And I'll say, oh, you know what, you're right. But if I don't think you're right, I'm going to push back, and you better not crumple.
And you know what's great about that, Mark? What I love about it is that I had an opportunity to see you in your element and operating in your element.
Yeah.
And you did something really cool is you allowed even some kids that we were working with to come and have, a day with the executive director, the CEO. And they did you did a CEO job shadow, and you allowed them to kind of sit in on one of your meetings. And I was like,
Yep.
wow, this is kind of cool. And so they saw you being the CEO, which I thought was super duper amazing. And in my conversation and watch you work your team and watching you lead, one of the things that I like and what I love about this dynamic here at the show that we borrowed from that relationship was what you just said. Jonathan, you said that if everyone's continue like, oh, you're great, oh, you're great, oh, you're great, you're great, oh, and we're just kind of like, it's like a little bless me club, we're not going to get much done. But we've got to be willing to be honest about where we are, honest about how we feel, honest about the direction that we're taking. We've got to be willing to take in. This is collaboration, right? Across surfaces, across teams. We've got to be willing to take input, whether it be positive or negative, and how we handle that input. And I love the way that we in this on this show, people say you guys have some crazy conversations. Oh, you guys are mad. No, we were not mad. We may have been passionate about something that we were saying, but we made an agreement at the very beginning of having this conversation. If we're going to talk about race, we're going to talk about race honestly. We're going to protect one another, meaning that if people are coming and the forces are going to lash out, we're going to protect everyone because it is important for us to model these conversations so that other people can see that we can have them. Now, as we talk about this has become a collaborative effort. We haven't always been happy. We haven't always felt good. There's always been conversations after the radio conversations. And sometimes our feathers get a bit ruffled, but it doesn't stop us from the overall arching view, which is that we want to have tough conversations for the purpose of making our viewers better, for challenging one another to become better, and to create spaces that other people can also foster those types of conversations. So I want to thank you guys for being so good and honest and open about that. Mark, are you thinking, well, I see your mind moving. What do you think?
To me, it gets back to like the point of trust. And, one of the reasons I like to get to know the people I'm working with, whether I've developed close relationships with my bosses as well as people that work for me, is because if I have a personal relationship with someone, I can safely give them tough feedback or constructive criticism, and they know it's coming from a good spot. And that's why I do it versus, and to me, that's what it's all about is we're all working together to help each other get better. But that starts with trust, and trust comes from personal interaction and getting to know each other as people and understanding that, the reality is we may not agree, but we're still good people and we care about each other.
Well, I think that is an amazing point. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about how do we make collaboration a priority in our communities, on our teams, on our jobs. How do we go by making sure that collaboration is a priority? And I want to thank those of you who are listening in our social media streams. If you're listening, why don't you like, tag, and share this conversation with other folk? Because we believe that collaboration, and I said that almost slow because my tongue was getting tied, that collaboration is the thing that is missing from our communities. It's almost like what the Beatles said. What we need now is love, more love. Stay tuned, stay, don't go away. We'll be back with more United Shades of Gray.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
This is Kareem. We're back with more United Shades of Gray Conversations of Race in America. Today, we are talking about building a culture of collaboration, whether it's in school, on the job, in the community, or in the workplace. How do we do that? And before we left, Mark, we were talking about making collaboration a priority. We talked about, Jonathan, once again, refresh us on that definition that we were using for what you believe collaboration is.
Oh, the whole being more than the sum of its parts, and being able to accomplish something better together than if each individual part was working on its own towards that end.
So,
One
Mark,
plus one equals 3, not 2.
what was that?
1 plus 1 equals 3, not 2.
Why is it important, Mark? Why is it important for us to look at collaboration? If we're in the workplace, why is collaboration so important?
Well, I think Jonathan said it well. I mean, the reality is if you're in a big company, no one person can get it done. And I had an old boss that used to have a good saying. It's, if you hire a handyman, do you want him to just have hammers in his toolbox, or do you want to have him a whole bunch? You want him to have a screwdriver, a wrench, if everybody, if all there is one answer, you're not going to get the best answer or the best solution. Different perspectives, different experiences. I've never seen a case where you don't end up with a better solution by bringing a team of people to a problem versus just a single person.
Wow. I want to kind of take you back, Mark, just a little bit. I remember one day, I stopped at your office, and which was a really cool office, by the way. I mean,
It
and
was.
you were walking around, and I want to think about what you had on. You had a very casual office experience, but you had like on a salmon colored jacket, and I think like some cream slacks and some loafers, and your collar was popped. You didn't have on a tie. And I looked at, as we were walking around, you didn't realize it, but I was paying attention to the other people, the other men. Skylar was one of the names. Is that correct?
Steve
Skylar?
Holte?
No, Steve I know Steve, but
Okay.
CFO, was he a CFO?
Oh, Steve Sklenar.
Sklenar.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the different people and everyone that was coming around, and I was looking at how you as the leader created an environment where people were adapting to the trend that you set, and how there was such a synergy in your workspace, and people were friendly, and it was a really interesting thing to see how much value and how important a leader's role is to those that are following. All right. So when we thinking,
Can I just say something, Kareem?
absolutely, go ahead. Yep.
I've been in multiple situations with organizations of thousands, and it just literally takes 1, 2, 3 people to take an organization that has underperformed for a decade and have it overperform within a few years. And it all comes back to leadership. And you don't need to change hundreds of people. You just need to change a handful of people.
And so I want to you're leading us right to where I'm going, and I want to talk about helping team members build bonds. The hardest thing on the planet is when people are trying to work collaboratively who don't like each other, or don't know each other, or haven't taken the time to form relationships. So when you look at it in the workplace, and we're talking about creating, were you going to say something, Jonathan?
I don't know that liking each other is a prerequisite. I think respecting one another.
Well, yeah. But if you don't like people, it's hard to respect them.
Harder. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay, so when I look at what you were doing, Mark, and I look at, and even talking with your staff now, that yet remains, one of the things that you did very well, and hearing them echo this sentiment, now that you're gone, I always tell people that you don't miss your water till it's gone. but hearing some of the things that are being said, how do you really help team members build strong bonds? What are some of the things, if people are listening and they're running a group, an organization, a church, whatever it is, if they're people leading, how do you get that group to build strong bonds?
Back to what I said before, it's about building personal relationships and getting to know each other as people. And you don't do that actually in work. You don't do that over the phone. You don't do that over email. You don't do that in work meetings. You have to consciously set up opportunities for people to get to know each other on a more personal level. So I always would have offsite leadership meetings Um, and it wasn't an all day, and those would be multiple days. And I would, and it was never an all day meeting of work. It was a half day to 2/3 a day of work. And the other third to a half was getting to know each other, doing something fun together, conscious team building type thing. And then I really made it clear, like, there's dinner, and then we're paying for you to get to know each other and build a team here. You're not running. You better not run back to your room after dinner. We're going to consciously choose a place that has an open atmosphere where you can sit down and get to know each other after dinner on a more personal level. I also made it very clear from the very beginning, my team is really important to me. And I have like 4 criteria for people to be on the team. But the quickest way to get off the team is not to be a team player. If you're not a team player, you're not going to be on this team.
So like someone like Jonathan, and I'm giving you an example. Jonathan he's a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably more of a one-on-one person than a group person. Would you agree,
Yep.
Jonathan?
I think you're right.
Okay, this is my assessment in working
Yep.
with you. He's a one-on-one person more so than a team person, not necessarily a team person, but a group person. So someone like him who's gonna do work, he's an amazing worker. He works his fingers to the bone. That's not his vibe. How do you bring someone in without overshadowing them and making them feel uncomfortable, um, or making them feel like they have to change who they are? Maybe is a better way of saying it.
No one's asking anyone to change who they are. If you have
But I don't feel comfortable doing all that. I want to do my work, and I just want to take care of my work.
Oh, you mean you just want to go do your job and move on?
Yeah. So how do you?
Well, yeah, but that's different than being a leader. That's cool too. I'm talking about how do I build. I was talking about how do I build trust with my leaders and a leadership team. Like when I was running an R&D group, I had technicians working for me, and basically what I would do at the beginning of every project is sit down with them and explain why we were doing this project, what it would mean for the business, and lay out the plan for them, get their input. And then I would spend a lot of time, again, I'm a walk around leader, I'd spend 2 or 3 hours a day probably in the lab with some of these guys, getting to know them as people. And they came at 8 a.m, they left at 5, but we built the trust because I spent the time and made the effort to get to know them as people and let them ask tough questions, that we had a much better team as a result, because they did things better than I could do in the lab for sure.
Mark, I want to say this because I think it's so important. When we met on a racial conversation, sort of. We were brought in specifically to talk about, your desire to be engaged and to impact and have some influence and to make some things happen in communities of color, right?
Yes.
So we met with that kind of undertone to the conversation. And for those of, I wish I could like replay it. If we could have recorded it, it would have been so funny. Because it was a very challenging conversation, and
you asked me some very pointed, direct questions, which I wasn't bothered by. I thought they were.
But why are people bothered by those questions, Mark?
Why was I not bothered by those questions?
No, but why are other people bothered by? Like, let's share the kinds of the questions I've asked.
What's that?
Why don't you share some of the questions?
In essence, it's like, who are you? Why are you doing this? And are you really genuine, or are you basically, this is a fad right now? Or are you just kind of trying to use this as a fad? That was in essence. And those are all fair, legitimate questions. And why should I be upset about you trying to discern whether I have honest intentions or I'm just full of it? And I've been asked, but that's what, to me, a leader does, is they're open to being challenged with really direct questions, and they don't let that bother them. Because if I were on the other side, that's what I would be thinking. Why should I be upset about that? Now, the third party called me afterwards and apologized profusely about what a tough conversation it was.
I didn't think he was going to be that tough. Oh my God.
I mean, it's like, those are fair questions. If I was in his, that's what I always love when there's a negotiation and one side gets upset at the other. It's like, hey, if you were on the other side of the table, you do the exact same thing. Why are you getting mad? So
It's interesting because I got the same call and was like, I didn't think you were going to be so hard. And I'm like, going hard. I asked, those are basic questions.
Yeah.
But let me tell you what was interesting. So I thought to myself, like, I'm never going to hear from them. I'm never going to hear from Mark again. And this is it. But what happened, Mark, was, and this was, for some people it may be crazy, but we believe we're all men of faith. The Lord put you on my heart. And I reached out to you. And the thing that allowed us to do business, going back to what you said at the start of this conversation, is that we had overlooked and we were trying to create, how do we answer these problems? And what I think that the Lord brought us back to was, okay, I need you to form a relationship. And we formed a relationship. And once we got, business and all of this other stuff out the way, and we began to just form a relationship, it helped us to understand one another. As you said, Jonathan, to create a place of mutual respect. And I think that we began to admire one another just kind of for like who we were. And that kind of set us a place for us to really begin to have deeper conversations than we would have ever been able to have.
Right. And that's where it comes back to trust. And to get trust, you actually have to build a personal relationship, not a business relationship, a personal relationship.
And so what that did, we began to have a relationship. And I said, hey, Mark, why don't you come on to my show and you can sign on and we can talk about white folks and black folks together on this radio program. And your response was like, yeah, Kareem, I don't see the upside for this for me. Yeah. But I think that if there had never been that time to reset, to have that conversation, to build trust, the conversations that we're having, that the people that listen, they're saying, I really love the conversations that you and Jonathan and Mark are having. And they're courageous conversations. We've done dinners at your place like this. I think that would have never happened. So one of the key elements that we're talking about is that we've really got to get back to the place, especially with so much technology. And I think technology is important. We're going to talk about that. But especially with technology being used so much, everything's an email, a text message, that we lose the human bond component to how we do business.
Yeah, I'm an old school dude. You don't build a relationship by texting or emailing somebody. It's face to face. That's how you actually build a real personal connection. I mean, yeah, you probably remember my kind of speech at the event a couple of years ago. You look at
it. You were the keynote speaker at the Heart of the City Awards, which still has yet to be topped. I loved what they did this last time, but Mark, I think your speech was one for the decade in terms of bringing the community together.
Yeah, I mean, because ultimately it's not a huge community. And if the community leaders could get to know each other a little better on a more personal level, I'd like to think more could happen. It just, they know each other, they interact with each other, it's pleasant. But I don't think I don't see, and who am I to say I live in Midland, but I don't see the strong personal connection between community leaders of different groups.
Yeah. Mark, Harvard did a research and they said 75% of people having a best friend that say that they have a best friend at work enjoy their work and are continually looking at new challenges and initiatives to be involved with, as opposed to 58% of those individuals who don't have close bonds. So bonds and relationship are so vitally important to really bringing collaboration into the workplace.
Yeah, if you're a boss out there, I just strongly encourage you to invite your workers and their families to your house on a weekend or, sometime. I did that a lot, and it's amazing the kind of the trust and camaraderie that you build as a team when you do that.
I think something that kind of occurred to me when I'm thinking back to what you're talking about with how you approach your leadership teams and getting them together and talking with them, I think that comes back to the collaboration between peers.
Yeah.
Because you can get the whole company together, but if you've got bosses and bosses' bosses and workers and all of that mixed together, there's always going to be that dynamic. Whereas if you get a group of peers together that are working together on a daily basis and people know this is my group, there's a lot more opportunity for that kind of relationship building.
But I think that if a boss or a supervisor or whatever it is creates an open environment where
Yeah.
people feel that what they have to say is going to be valued, is going to be looked at as equal, and it's handled as such. Once it comes from their lips, then people would, even in a place where the boss is in the room, would be willing to add. And I think that bosses would have a lot to gain, bosses that are out there, by allowing their team to express where they are and what their thoughts are and what their opinions are, and take those things and process them, and look at, am I learning anything that maybe I didn't know before? Mark, what are your thoughts in terms of you coming in as a CEO and you got down line individuals that are a part of that conversation, creating a space for them to feel comfortable saying what they need
Yeah,
to
I
say?
mean, ultimately, it's kind of back to what I tend to be super transparent, super authentic, and I'd rather be over transparent than under transparent. Sometimes that bites you, but I think again, it's you got to mimic what you say, or you got to act what you got to do what you say you're going to do. So if you invite people to ask tough questions, you better not bite their head off, or you better not punish them. You better, answer the question then, so.
Mark, okay. If you were inviting people to your home, you're one who hosts folks at your home all the time,
Yep.
including folks who are a part of the organization that you were working for, right?
Yep. Oh, I had probably 80 people over here.
Okay,
Yeah.
is that too personal? Some people may say that's too personal. What is your response to that?
Well, I guess I would ask them why is that too personal? Again, like back to kind of your comment about, I ultimately want to enjoy where I'm working. I spend at least 8 hours a day awake working with people. Frankly, it's more than I spend awake with my wife and kids a lot of days. Don't you want to like them? Don't you want to be, have an enjoyable experience? So why is that too personal? I would
Well,
flip it around.
I'm just thinking
Yeah, I
about
mean,
the
ultimately,
people.
you've got to be true to yourself. But I would just challenge that person of like, well, what are you? What is your concern? And start small. Start with two people that you kind of enjoy working with. So.
Do you guys find it difficult to build collaboration or have collaborative efforts with folks via Zoom, Microsoft Teams, like virtual components? I know, Mark, when we first started having meetings, you were like, none of this virtual crap. Let's meet in person. I don't want to do any virtual. But when we look at it, there are a lot of people who have found their niche operating virtually. How do you
Sure.
bring them in? Because now we have workplaces that are now hybrid. Some folks love the grind of coming into work every single day and seeing people and meeting people. I personally am that person. Other folk are like, hey, I can do what I need to do at home, throw a load of laundry in, I can work virtually, I'll be in the meeting. How do we bring collaboration when people are in this mixed workspace? And I say that because just recently, this was just yesterday, General Motors put out a notice to all of their salary employees saying that on January 1st, 2024, that you are mandated to be in office at least 3 days a week. And I think it was Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday were the suggested days. How do we build collaboration when we have all of these hybrid workspaces?
Well, again, I think ultimately every company's got to decide what they do. But if you have one, I think it gets back to it. You have to be conscious and create opportunities for that to happen. And it doesn't happen virtually. So you have to basically mandate at some point, people are going to be in the office, or they're going to be at some event or some venue together. And you have to have a very conscious plan about how you're going to work on building trust and relationship. I mean, going virtual with an existing team works for a while, and then it starts to unwind. And then when you bring new team members in, it doesn't work because there is no kind of sense of team or trust or community. And that's why you see all the data out there, and you see some people saying, oh, it's better, it's more productive. It's not. The fact is, more and more companies are coming to the realization that everybody working wherever the hell they want is not very productive or successful. And that's why you're seeing more and more companies requiring at least a certain number of days in the office.
I always struggle to figure out how people stay awake at a computer for 8 hours or 9 hours. I just don't understand it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I have my own personal opinion, which is I'm
what's
not
your
sure that
opinion?
they are, or they're not running errands and they're not doing this and they're not doing that. So
Don't they have technology now that can determine how, like, if you're in front of your computer?
keystrokes and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I think
man, that would be, again, that's just, yes, they
all
do.
right. So before we only got a few minutes here, Mark, but I wanted you to just touch a little bit about the importance of feedback, giving it honestly and often. How important is feedback to this collaborative process?
I think it's essential. I mean, again, we all owe it to each other to help each other get better. That's why I always had a culture statement, and one of the key elements was about development, and everybody has the right to be developed, and you can't develop somebody without giving them constructive feedback, both good and bad. And so frequently, like if someone had to give a big presentation, I would say, you're going to come and give me, me and 2 or 3 other people a practice run, and we're going to give you feedback with the idea of like, how can you have a great presentation? We're going to help you make your presentation better. But I think it's essential to have honest feedback, both here's what you did well and here's what opportunities for improvement. It's essential.
And I think it's important when you're talking, you can talk about a leader versus follower relationship giving feedback, but when you're talking among peers, it's important to build that trust so that one person can come to another. I know I've had people that I've worked with and that I continue to work with who come to me and say, "What do you think of this?" And being able to give that feedback, and I trust them that they're not going to freak out, and they trust me that I'm going to give good feedback, and that relationship goes both ways, that we can trust each other before bringing it to, because once you get authority involved, well, then it's a
And I
different.
think, again, if you're a boss, you ought to create. I did a couple things as a boss. Like, number one, I can be a pretty intimidating person. I have strong opinions. I'm not willing to voice them. I'm not afraid to voice them. I had people that worked for me that we had longstanding relationships that I actually told them to challenge me in public on an issue, and I would agree with them to show people it was safe to challenge me. And we would set it up. I think the other thing I did was actually coach feedback, and we've talked about, Brooke's been on your show before, Brooke Beebe.
Yeah.
I had never been involved in government affairs, and I just said, hey, I want you to feel comfortable giving me feedback as we start to talk to some of these politicians. And I'll always remember, like, the second or third time we were meeting with people, she pulled me aside and she goes, like, it would be kind of helpful if you actually looked at them and acted like you were interested in what they were saying. And it was like, okay, Mom, but she was right. And so I think as a boss, you may have to make it safe for people to do that, because you have your blind spots and flaws too as a boss.
That is so vitally important. Now let me ask you a quick question, Mark, because we got about a minute and a half. When we think about this, do you approach giving feedback to folks who are maybe like minorities? Is it different to give feedback? Do you speak to them differently when you give feedback than you do to people that are what you know?
No.
Why it's not necessary, Mark? You got to be sensitive with me.
I don't know. I'm not that delicate. I always tell people I'm just, I'm not that delicate. So I remember this one woman who, you consider a minority. I would give them pretty direct feedback of like, you have to be either arrogant or stupid to do what you just did, and here's why. And they started crying, which was not a good thing. So
I'm going to HR immediately.
but they knew I was right, and they, eventually they accepted the fact that was the case. But,
Mark, one of the things that I like is that you are an equal opportunity employer when it comes to being honest. I think that's what we have in common, is that we can shoot straight from the hip. We don't take it personal. We shake it off to live another day. For those of you who are continually tuning in and tuning into this conversation, I want to say thank you for continually tuning in. We're going to say take care of yourselves and each other. The holiday season is here. Love on each other. Spread cheer, grace, and peace.